So welcome everybody. The first thing I wanted you to notice before we really get started is the fact that when we're just looking at each other and we're not looking at any screens, we could see everybody. So I really like that. One thing that the only criticism I have of Zoom, which is the tool we're using, is that when you show a screen, you can only see 4 people at a time. And so there's a little bit of logistics for you as teachers to make sure that you're paying attention to everybody at all times. And so we're going to go through all of that at one point or another. But first, I just want to welcome all of you. And I had the opportunity to read for most of you why it is that you're here and what you're hoping to get out of this class. And what you haven't really gotten a chance to get to know each other yet. So what I'd like to start with is actually an activity that we do, that I do with my students a lot of times. And that is, we're going to share a whiteboard. And so does everybody see the whiteboard?
Yeah.
Great. Do you also now see that you can only see like 4 people at a time on the screen?
Yeah.
So you could use the arrow at the bottom of the video camera area. Click on that, and then you could scroll through the different people. But typically, whoever is speaking is going to end up at the very top. So you could be aware of that. One other thing is, if you find that there's noise in the background, you can mute your mic. So that's usually, the bar is on different screens, sometimes at the top of your screen, sometimes at the bottom. But if you hover your mouse over the bottom or the top of the screen, you should see a bar of icons show up, and one of them is a mute button. So if everybody who's in right now who's not muted, if you could mute your mic, and then when you want to speak, just unmute your mic. So again, that's in the bottom left corner. Okay, I still hear some background. There we go. Okay. So what we'll start with, and this is for the most part, people have their mics unmuted because they're talking or participating. But it's just kind of like in between things to help keep the sound under control. So what we're going to do to get started is we're going to just use this whiteboard a little bit, and you should find in that bar with different icons, it should either say annotate, or there should be a button that says more with 3 dots, and if you hover over that or click on that, then you should see a button that says annotate, and that should give you a bar with more features, including text, lines, a spotlight, or arrows if you're trying to point things out. So just to get started, why don't you write something? You could write it in English or Hebrew, whatever you prefer, but just maybe one thing about yourself. And it's a little tricky with a mouse. I have a laptop with a touchpad, and I actually prefer to use that. I also sometimes use what's called a Wacom tablet, and I don't have one with me at the moment. I'll bring it next week to show you. But it's basically a little tablet, and then you have what looks like a pen, and you would use that, it's called a stylus, but you would use that on the tablet to write, and then your hand feels like you're really writing. So you've got the options. If you want to write something about yourself in English, you could use the text option and just type. If you want to try writing it in Hebrew, and with my kids, because we're not learning how to be fluent in Hebrew, they're trying to get to their bar bat mitzvah, so they need to know how to read and write the letters, but they don't necessarily have to know modern Hebrew language, not that much. So I'm okay with them writing English words, but with Hebrew letters. So why don't you give that a try? And if you're having trouble finding any of the features, unmute and just let me know. Or there's a chat option. There should be a chat option. Let's see. Yeah, if you go under more, you might not have to go under more, but you could see there's a chat icon, and you can choose that and then write your questions. And with my kids, I like to encourage them to write something kind of mysterious, like a clue. So not saying necessarily that I like pie, although kids love to write that one. I don't know why. But maybe like the name of something you like, and then we have to try to guess what that is. And then when you're done writing your word or your phrase or your clue, feel free to just explore the tools in this bar. And so if you wanted to draw shapes or use your arrow or something, just, this is a good time to just get used to that. And let's see, 1, 2, 3. I'll give you just another minute because I don't believe everyone's written something yet or finished what they were writing. And so part of how I'm going to teach this course, and we'll get into the details in a little bit, but I just want to start with something fun to get to know each other. And then if you've brought your pictures, we'll be using that too. Part of how I'm going to run this course is the way that I run the course with my students so that you could experience what that's like as a student and then decide if that's something that you want to do with your kids. And also, so there will be that component to it. And then I want to have plenty of opportunity for all of you to have the chance to act as teachers online so you could get the feel of that as well. And then I'm also going to bring in a lot of different technology. And that part could feel a little overwhelming because, depending, you're all here, which means that you have a certain level of comfort with technology. But it is a bit difficult when you're introduced to something new and then something new again. But the reason why I'm doing that is just to expose you to a lot of different options. I'm not going to expect you to be able to create things in every single technology that I'm going to show you. More so, I want you to be exposed to it so you could pick what works best for you. And then just pick a couple things because the kids will also get overwhelmed or intimidated if there are too many new technologies being introduced. So it's really fun and exciting, but we also want to be selective, not just technology for technology's sake. But because this course is kind of an overview and I want you to have a lot of exposure, there will be a lot more technology being introduced than what I would recommend for you with your students. So it looks like we have a lot of cool messages here. So, Bavakasha, I'd like to get started with, I'm going to take my spotlight. So you don't get this unless you're the facilitator, but you can see my little red spotlight here. Students just get these arrows, and it says your name on it. It stamps your name when you click the arrow. But I'm going to use my spotlight a little bit here. And I'm just going to highlight something, and if you're the one that wrote this, then you could be the one to talk about it. Just remember to unmute your mic before you talk. So first, I see right here, Gary.
That's me. By the way, Alt-A also mute and unmute your mic. Might be easier for some people.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, those hotkeys do help. I haven't bothered to learn all of them yet, so I'm glad you brought that up. So hi Gary, did you write anything else besides hi Gary?
Underneath it.
Oh, great. So could you read to us what you wrote?
Shmi Naftali, Yeshli Chultza B'Tzeva Adom.
Metsuyan, Tadarava. And that's exactly what some of the kids will do. So with my students, like I said, they don't have the requirement to learn modern Hebrew really at all. But some teachers decide to introduce it. And I do also. I try to inject it into just the conversation. So you'll often hear me say bivakasha or mitsuyan, and slowly introducing new vocabulary just through speaking. When I was at New Cage a couple weeks ago, I went to a session called English, and which is kind of the same idea. In that case, we were learning about making songs and putting some Hebrew words into English songs. But in this case, just sort of using some of the Ivrit instead of English, and then by context, they're picking it up. So, toda rabah, but here we have a Hebrew sentence, and this would be a good opportunity if I was with my students to ask them to translate, to ask them to see if they could find any spelling, like ways that we can improve spelling, or sometimes kids will forget, what a final letter looks like. And then I'll be just very supportive of like, that was great. Adom, but how do we write a mem when it's at the end of a word? That kind of stuff. So thank you, Gary. Let's see, who wrote this? Anybody? Well, I guess it'll remain a mystery for now. But
It's me. I was trying to unmute.
Oh, okay.
No, I didn't forget. I just couldn't find it because the bar was no longer at the bottom.
Yeah, so that's one thing you'll have to remind your students too the first couple of weeks, because they're getting to know this technology. And the bars do disappear to just get out of your way, and then you're going to have to hover your mouse back over the bottom or the top to see them.
It still wasn't showing up. I had to hover over my picture, and when I clicked on my picture, there was an option to unmute.
Oh, that's interesting. What kind of computer do you have?
I'm on a Mac.
Oh, okay.
A MacBook Pro.
And that's the other thing is different types of computers will respond in different ways. So when I say, you'll probably find the bar at the bottom, I use PC mainly, but even some people on PCs will have it at the top, and apparently Mac is different. So thank you for sharing that.
Stephanie?
Yes.
I noticed that when I clicked on options to get the annotating bar,
Mm-hmm.
the bottom bar with the chat and the mute and the video is disabled. Like it disappears. It's either one or the other. One, right?
Yeah.
It's either the bottom bar or the options bar.
And what computer?
I had to exit the annotation bar in order to see the bottom bar with the mute button and participants, etc.
Okay, and what kind of computer do you have?
It's just a PC.
And then what?
Mine's like that, and it's the Mac.
Do you know what version of Windows you have on your PC, Yael?
I think it's 8.
8? Okay.
Yeah.
And Farah, do you know which version operating system?
iOS, it updates itself.
Okay, so it's just the most current one probably? Okay, yeah. So that's one thing that you'll have to keep in mind with your students. This is kind of like a bring your own device sort of deal. We can't control much in terms of their computer. In terms of the device, so if you had a chance to read the second email, I mentioned that starting next week, I'm hoping you could bring a smart device, like a tablet. Tablet is preferred, or iPad, but if you have a smartphone and that's what you have, then that'll be fine for this class. As for your teaching, you're going to want to make a decision about whether or not you even need a tablet, and then what kind you might want, whether it's an Android or iPad, or if phones are okay. Because what you're going to find is the more variance there is in these technologies, the more work it is for you as the facilitator to make sure that everything's going to work well for everyone. So we'll talk a little bit more about that shortly, or at least before the end of this particular session. But thank you for bringing those things up, because with my experience and my students, we've all had PCs, and so what happens with a Mac is still new ground for me. And then Yael, depending on what kind of PC you have, do you have like a Chromebook or anything like that, or no?
No, it's just a Dell.
Just a Dell? Oh, okay. Well, that's interesting. But it is 8, Windows 8.
Yeah.
And so this is one of those things where the very first class, I normally ask the parents to be there as well. And hopefully they have a little familiarity with their computers. And if they don't, they can call me on the phone. I'm often on the phone the very first class, just a little bit helping things make sure that they go smoothly. But more or less, this is one of those technologies that people figure out. And luckily for us, Generation Z, which is what I will call this generation of kids, they even more so than the millennials are really great at just troubleshooting this kind of thing. One of the things with us oldies is that we were around back when there was DOS, and you could literally blow up your computer just by virtue of clicking the wrong button or putting your slash marks in the wrong direction. Things could really go very wrong. And but that world is gone. And so these kids, my nephew, he's when he was only 4 months old, he figured out how to take my brother's cell phone and scroll through it and find the videos of himself that he liked and watch them, and that's how he would fall asleep. So my brother figured, I guess I better get myself another cell phone because this one doesn't belong to me anymore. So these kids are not afraid. And so if they have little issues like this, they'll be able to get it through it pretty quickly. If anybody does have any problems at any point and you can't speak for some reason, you can't unmute your mic, I just want to make a note that in that bar where you were able to choose annotate or choose mute, if you go over more, or it might not even be more, it might just be an icon, there's something that says chat, and then you could use the chat box. I'm going to put just a welcome chat message, and right now I have it set up so that everyone could see the messages and everyone could write to everyone else in a group message situation. But if you were to use Zoom with your class, you'll find that you could allow private messages so that it could just be from one person to another. I don't like to do that because I like to make sure I know everything that's being said from one student to another. But just so that you're aware that that's an option. And you might see on the bar where it says chat, you might see like a green circle with a 1 in there to indicate that there's one new message. When you're the facilitator and somebody writes a message, it often just pops up in the top right of your screen like a notification. So, okay, getting back to all this. So Farah, you wrote Rikud, and if you wouldn't mind, oh, and that's one other thing. I just noticed Gary was raising his hand, but I'll remind you that when we're sharing screens, we can't see everybody. And it's just kind of lucky that I happened to be on the screen where I could see Gary and saw that he was raising his hand. So if you want to say something when we're in this kind of a situation, it's better to raise your virtual hand. And you could do that by going to the bar where you had all of your options. There's one that should say participants. And if you click on that, you could see everybody. And if you click on, well, since I'm the host, I can't see exactly what the language is. So maybe one of you could share, but there should be something next to your name that says like raise hand. So if one of you wants to check that out.
I see it this is Amy, I see it on the bottom of that box. It says mute me or raise hand.
Oh, great. Thank you. Appreciate that, Amy. So yeah, so I see some of you are able to raise your hand. Great. And what I see as the facilitator, which is what I believe you'll see in the recording should you decide to watch the archive, is I see a blue notification that goes over your video that says that you're raising your hand. And if you're one of the people that I can't see because I'm not looking directly at you, it would show up as a notification in the top right of your screen. So, okay, now back to Farah.
Hi. So I did Recruit because I love to dance, and I did it in pink because it's my favorite color.
Toda rava, that was great. And I love how you incorporated both the color and the word. And then this is where a lot of times my kids will be like, oh, I love dancing, and I do this kind of dancing. And that's one of the things that I love about this class is that at least the way that I like to run it is the kids do have this opportunity to get to know each other and bond on levels that go beyond just the learning experience. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, I encourage you to do that too.
So
There's
for
always
that, will you have your kids stay off mute so that they can chime in easily like that?
So I usually have my kids, most of the kids are not ever muted because they don't have background noise. So that's one of the things that in an intro letter I tend to write to the parents that has the expectations listed. One of the things is to try to get the kids set up where they have all their devices that they need, all their tools, and in a quiet space. So the majority of them can be unmuted the whole time, and then they don't have to remember to mute and unmute. Some of them just don't have that kind of space. And so, but they've become really good at just muting and unmuting as needed. And I think that we're going to get used to that too, because we're going to be doing a lot of talking, everybody. And so you'll probably get very comfortable with just going back and forth with that. So, okay, from here, oh, and one other thing that my students often do is they do use the chat a lot. And they will write messages to each other, and they will not always be educational. And I'm completely okay with that personally, because for me, one of the big goals is the bonding. And so I do really like that. And as long as they could still pay attention, they're not being disruptive, I'm okay with them passing notes. So that's just me. But that is one of the things that brings my kids together. Or activities like this, where we can practice our Ivrit and at the same time learn about each other. So who wrote this one? Any takers? Well, we will get back to that then. How about this?
That would be me.
Toda rabah. So could you read what you wrote and tell us what it means, please?
Ani ohevet et Eretz Yisrael. I love the land of Israel.
Toda rabah. And what made you choose to write that?
I don't know. Except from the obvious, I really don't know. I started writing. I was just fooling around. That's what popped into my head. I don't know.
Well, that is perfect. Whatever is right in your head is probably what's really important to you. So Toda rabah, Yael. And who wrote this one right here? I'm guessing it's Mayan.
Yep, it is. Hold on. And here I am.
Toda.
Yep.
One thing I'll just to make a note of to all of you, at least for me, because Mayan is speaking now, she went from not being seen in the videos because she was, probably towards the end of the line. And now I see her. She's one of the 4 people, and it just popped up that way. So, okay, so why don't you tell us, Mayan, what you wrote and what it means?
Okay, I just wrote מעיין לטייל בעברית. זה אפילו לא משפט. It's not even a sentence.
That's okay. And what made you choose to put לטייל?
בעברית או באנגלית?
In English, just because not everyone here is a Hebrew teacher. They might be Judaics. So,
just because I love traveling. I just came back from 5 weeks in Israel. So.
Oh, nice. Where else do you like to travel?
Who doesn't like to travel?
Oh, yeah, no, exactly. Have you been to other places besides Israel that you really like?
To start counting? Yeah, many, many places. I love travel. I love to be sightseeing.
Well, I will say, too, that when my kids get to travel, so after spring break or after Thanksgiving, those kinds of times, I'll often, when it comes to this activity, I always have them write in Hebrew, because that's what we were learning. But that's not what this class is about, not specifically us learning Hebrew. So that's why there's not that rule. But for my students, because we're learning Hebrew, they have to use the Hebrew letters to write, even if they're English words. And then after vacation times, I'll often have a theme, and I'll ask them to write a word or a phrase that gives us a clue as to what they did over that time off. And a lot of times we go into really great conversations about people's trips. It's a lot of fun. So especially when the clue is something like skiing, and then there are a few places you could have gone skiing, and then we're trying to guess which ones. So, and did you just add this in, Mayan?
Nope, somebody else did.
Oh, okay.
I did. I just turned it into a sentence. Mayan ohevet latail. Now we have a sentence.
Perfect.
Collaboration.
So that's excellent. Okay, let's see. Who wrote this?
That was me. That was Amy. So one of the issues for me is I'm left-handed, but I use my mouse in the right hand. So it's unclear to me if that's why it was so hard to make the letters, or
Oh.
so I guess a stylus would alleviate that, right? If you have a left-handed student and they use a stylus, it would be easier.
Yes.
Is that right?
So I'm glad you brought that up. And that is exactly why I like to require tablets in my class. So this kind of activity, kids, a lot of my kids at least have like touch pads and things so that they can use the hand that they usually write with. And so the handwriting is not great if that's what they're choosing to use, but that's not what we're judging at that moment. But what I do for certain activities is I try to do the writing activities on a tablet so that the kids can practice writing with a stylus, which feels a little bit more like writing. And the reason why I want a tablet and not a smartphone is because what I learned the hard way is that the screen being so small, it becomes harder for the kids to write their sentences, or they don't even have to write full sentences, but even one word can be a little tricky on such a small screen. So, Toda for sharing that. And I see this must be Yael. And this must also be Amy. And so you live in North Carolina?
Yeah,
So
I'm in Raleigh.
You're up late.
Yeah, is everyone else from Chicago?
I don't believe so. Let's see.
I'm from Aurora, Illinois, which is the second largest city in Illinois.
Kansas City.
Chicago area.
Chicago area.
Chicago area.
And I'm coming to you from Boulder, Colorado. I picked the time of the day in part because I was hoping that if anyone on the West Coast wanted to join, they'd be done with work and the East Coasters wouldn't be asleep yet, hopefully. So, who's from Montreal? I feel like
Yael.
Oh, Yael. Excellent. Ta-da. Did the inventor come back?
Yeah, I just was still on mute there. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no problem. Okay, so was that Justin then?
Yeah.
Super. And do you not have your video cameras off? I don't know if you're aware of that.
Oh no, yeah. The my CPU is overheating.
Oh, okay. So that's definitely, thank you for mentioning that. Yet again, one of those technical things. And if you got the email, let's see, which one was it? I think the second email I sent you had a link to the technical requirements for Zoom. And that's, that people are going to have the technology that they have. So you kind of have to decide as the teacher what recommendations you're going to make and what requirements you're going to make. Obviously, if you're the teacher, you have to have a setup where you could have the video showing the whole time, and hopefully the kids too. It's a big part of the bonding. But we don't want any broken computers either. So, but yes, tell us about you being an inventor.
So I've created a magnetic shoal, which you get to play with. I don't know if you have one accessible at your hand there. But
I do actually in the other room. I
know Amy also has one there too. Ways of engaging kids through developmentally appropriate play. So taking all my educational experience and putting it into the business side of supporting educators. And in fact, it was just on this week, the podcast Unorthodox. So if anyone hasn't listened to it yet, it's a great time to get started. It's a wonderful podcast coming out of New York that is really about roundtable Jewish discussions, and they have both a guest Jew of the week and guest Gentile of the week. And I had the privilege of being the guest Jew. So it's kind of fun.
Wow, that's so cool. Well, Yishar Koach, that's great. So anybody needs their hands-on education toys and and manipulatives. That's Justin. And who drew this? Land of Israel.
That would be also me.
Oh,
Since
okay.
I love Israel.
Well, that's a perfect reason to draw it.
Right.
And you may have noticed then, some of you may not have, but Yael used a different, like the marker tool instead of the writing tool, which is an important thing for me with my students because this is see-through. So it could be a highlighter, and I'll show you at some point some activities that we do where this becomes important. And let's see. So, and Yael, you were the one from Montreal. And let's see. And who drew these fun things up top? Or who wrote this?
Hi, both of those were me. I'm sorry it took me a second.
Oh, that's fine. And could you tell us about what you wrote?
Yes, I also just wrote something and didn't think it through totally, but I do like both of those. My email is Sunshine Becky, and I do love sunflowers. I love all flowers, so. I have a sunflower tattoo, actually. It was my grandmother's, my Bubby's favorite flower. And I drew the shapes because I was experimenting. I'm like very art-based in my Hebrew teaching, and so I saw them and thought it would be fun to get a little practice.
Well, Toda Rabah for doing that, because that's one of the things I'm also hoping we're going to get out of this course, all of us, is, we're bringing together people from different backgrounds. And for me, the great value in that is people are going to be thinking in different ways about all of this and bringing new perspectives. And I'm going to learn from you just as much as you're going to learn from me about ways in which we can be teaching online effectively. And so I'll kind of bring in the nuts and bolts and the foundation. But as for the experimental directions you can go, that's a lot of the cool things are going to come right from all of you. So, and then who just got back from Europe?
Oh, that's me. I'm Debbie.
Debbie, where were you in Europe?
14 countries in 30 days.
Oh, is that all?
Yeah.
Someone else likes to travel here, I see.
It was a bucket list trip, And one of the big things was through southern Italy to see all the sunflower fields. That was really cool.
Oh, wow. So you and Becky have something to talk about. Very cool. Did I miss anything? Did anybody write something here and I didn't highlight it or notice it? Okay. Well, then in that case, we will move on a little bit. We're going to do another activity shortly. Let me just double check.
Stephanie, I have a question.
Yep.
When we were looking at that whiteboard, if I erased or undid, it was only mine. Like, I can't erase someone else's work. Is that correct?
Thank you for asking that. So, no, the teacher can erase anything, but students can only erase or undo their own work.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And so, as we go through this, it's going to be a mixture of learning the tools, learning the pedagogy, tips and tricks. So I hope you're all okay with that we're going to be sort of dipping our toes into a lot of things at once. And after today, I'm going to have the syllabus up so that you can, see what exactly you can expect from each of our sessions. I wasn't sure how many of you were actually going to try for the certificate. And a lot of this was based around having people who wanted to go for that certificate because it means you're going to be doing specific assignments at specific times. And if you're actually teaching online this year, it's also the timing is to support you in that teaching experience. Can you raise your yad if you are teaching online this year? And if you don't have your video camera on, if you can just unmute and just say that you're teaching this year. Okay, so it looks like Gary, you raised your yad, and Amy, you raised your yad. So could you tell us a little bit about what class you're going to be teaching, how you're going to, what grades, that kind of thing?
I'm hoping to use this really for tutoring kids that can't make it to our school for a variety of conflict reasons and other reasons. Mm-hmm. And I'm the director of the school, so I'll be chatting with the teachers, finding out what they're covering, and then hopefully working with the kids once a week to keep them on target so when they can come back into the classroom, they're not behind.
Okay, excellent. And Gary?
We serve kids in Aurora from an hour drive radius, all the way from Ottawa, Illinois to Elgin to Joliet and so on. The average time to get to school is about half an hour to 40 minutes. So this year I'm going to be tutoring 2 of our kids who are preparing for bar mitzvah. And that tutoring, including the use of Trope Trainer and so on, is going to be online. And then, of course, Shabbat mornings when they're going to services, we're going to be able to practice for real. So this is going to, I've got a schedule right now that goes out 2 years teaching various different kids bar and bat mitzvah. I would like to extend this to Hebrew classes also, which we're going to be able to do, because a lot of kids cannot make it to the weekday program. Almost all of them make it to the Sunday program. But unfortunately, the weekday program, 4:30 to 6:30 on Wednesdays, some of their travel times increase from 45 minutes or an hour up to 2 hours because of traffic jams and single lane roads and so on. And that could be 4 hours round trip. They just are unwilling to do that. So what we want to do is introduce into the school the option of a Hebrew program for the weekdays.
Toda, thank you for sharing that. That's exactly what this program is here for. So I'm really glad it's going to be able to help you this year. I am just taking a quick look at my to-do list to make sure that we cover everything. And I did, also, can you raise your yad if you have a picture that you can share with us today before the end of our shiur? If you didn't, that's okay. But if you did, okay, raise your yad, toda. So we'll do that a little bit later too, because part of the reason I want to do that is more getting to know you, but also it shows you how we could use some of the annotation tools that we just used on actual pictures and things that you have, which makes that even more of an interactive experience. So the other part, let's see. I asked you in the email to say a little bit about your assumptions with online learning and your concerns. And just because, again, I was the only one that got to read that so far, I just want to make sure that I'm going to address your concerns. I'm hoping that some of you that have strong feelings either way, can share some of your thoughts with each other so that we could see where we're all coming from. So feel free to just speak out, unmute your mic when you're ready and just share your thoughts. Not everyone all at once.
Tell us again what you wanted us to do.
Sorry, just share your thoughts on teaching online, like your assumptions, your worries, what you think maybe the parents or your administrators are thinking. Part of the homework, if you had a chance to do it, was to think about these things, maybe even ask your associates what their thoughts are, because this is a new idea in Jewish education. So I'm curious to see where we're all coming from, and for all of you to be aware of where you're coming from.
Well, I don't mind saying a concern. I didn't write in my email, but I teach third graders primarily. And I usually am the lucky lady that gets quite rambunctious children. And in my classes in person, I am able, with a mix of like stern humor, able to kind of simmer them down. But I'm nervous about that in an online setting if they kind of are just like excited to be on the computer and going wild. And my second one really quickly is I am nervous about them going to other websites and like not paying attention while class is going on. And I wanted to know if you can see in the computer, like if they're going on other stuff at the same time.
That's a good question. You can't see their screen unless they share it with you, but it does get pretty obvious when they're doing something else. So I did have one girl who I had her for 3 years, and the first 2 years, very focused, very, very attentive, really great student. And the third year, I noticed her like doing this a lot. And she's doing her homework, and like I talked to her parents about it, because it's like, what do you do when it's not like the kid's trying to cause trouble or anything? It was disruptive though, because it would be her turn in an activity and like she doesn't know where we are, and then we all have to wait for her to find her place and this and that. I mean, it's a problem. And I did have to talk to her parents about it, but she was studying for her bat mitzvah and she was doing her homework. I mean, it's like, that's what mensches do when they're being bad, right? But you can figure that out. And I had one other kid who, Hebrew is not his favorite thing, and he'd have a hard time focusing. And I could tell when he looked really intense on the computer, but we weren't really doing anything that required that level of intensity. And again, that becomes a conversation with the parents. I do find that is one of the best ways to keep things in order, is to make sure that you have the buy-in from the parents and keeping in touch with them regularly. So I don't know what's required of you with your teachers, with your administrators at your schools. At Beth Emmet, the teachers who teach in person write like a review of the month, I think, or maybe they write every couple of weeks. I don't know, because I don't teach in person. But I elected to write a letter to the parents every single week right after class, just outlining what we did and what the homework is. And I spend time with that. I mean, I think I spend more time than what should be expected of a teacher, but that's just my style. I don't really know another way to do it. But I'm really outlining like everything we've learned. And in that process, I'll also send a follow-up email to individual parents if there's something going on, and also to give them praise. They love hearing when their kids are great. And so, and they really appreciate that kind of immediate response. And because we're seeing each other, I'll even have parents like come to class. They'll stick their heads into the video camera and say, "Oh, can I talk to you after class just for a few minutes?" And want to let me know that their daughter is going to be gone for a couple weeks or something, that kind of thing. But that's a huge thing. I've also found that some kids who are hyperactive actually do better in this situation because they're bouncing all over the place and they're moving in their chair, but it's not physically disrupting anyone because there's no one sitting next to them. It really just depends, but we could definitely get into that a bit more as we go through the next several weeks. And I see a lot of hands up. So I'm wondering if your hand is up, like your virtual hand is up and you don't mean to have it up, then Bakasha, please put it back down. And if it is up, feel free to just unmute and just, ask your questions or comments.
Hi, is that okay, Alicia? So I have a question. I have a friend who is teaching through Skype.
Yes.
So I want to know a little bit, like, how would you describe the difference between what you are doing? And obviously I can see you have 10 students. Is it Skype only possible like with one student? I mean, I just don't know enough to know even what the difference would be, and I'm interested in knowing that.
So the first thing I'm going to say is I'm no longer an expert in that. And the reason is once I found Zoom, I was so happy with it, I didn't have to look around for other tools. A few years ago, I was carefully going through several of these tools and really figuring out the pros and cons of each one. Skype at the time didn't have as many features as I wanted. So with this one, with Zoom, and it's free for 40 minutes with 25 people or less. It's, I think, $15 a month for 25 people or less for an unlimited length of time. But you don't want 25 students in your class anyway, so for this purpose, that should be just fine. But aside from the fact that we could all collaborate and write on the screens together, like you saw before, you could share your screen, I could share mine. Skype also, I know you could share screens with each other. I don't know if you could write on them the way that we just did. But this also has a feature called breakout rooms, which is a newer feature, where I can assign you to different rooms and you can now do group work. So one of the things that I love doing with my kids with Hebrew is taking a really easy prayer like Oseh Shalom with very few words, having the kids look at what the meaning is of each word and act it out so that it helps them remember the meaning. So like, especially it helps with Shorashim. So like for Oseh, they might do something like they're building or they're making something, you know, whatever. So they come up with crazy things. So Ose, Shalom, whatever they want to do for peace. Birumav, you know, every single word they come up with a hand gesture, and they'll do that in partners. This is something I used to do in an in-person class, and it worked really well. So these breakout rooms lets you do that in an online venue, so that the kids aren't talking over each other and they're not distracting each other or seeing each other's secrets before they're ready to reveal them. So I'm actually going to put you all into rooms, and you could do like an automatic, like just whoever, 3 people, 4 people end up in the same room, or you can manually assign people rooms. But I'm just going to do automatically. I'm going to create these rooms right now, and I'm going to open them. And so now you've all been invited to join a breakout room. And so you could go into those rooms now. And I see that Becky and Gary went into their room. Alicia, Amy, and Yael into theirs. Debbie and Mayan into hers. And I will go. Hello, you came back before I could come to you. I was just visiting the other breakout rooms, and I didn't get to yours yet, but just showing them how I could pop in and out. But now I'm going to end the breakout room so that we're all back here. And it'll close in 30 seconds. I guess that gives them a warning that they should finish what they're saying. So, so these are some of the things, though, that Zoom can do that other resources can't. So I've looked into, in my past, I looked into GoToMeeting, Google Hangouts, Skype, and they all have some really great features, but in terms of being able to do all the things that I like to do, that I find to be important, Zoom is my favorite. But that's not to say you should not explore things like Skype, because all of them have gotten better over the years, and I just can't tell you for sure all the differences today because it's been a few years since I've checked into it.
Can you do file transfers? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so if you all want to go into the chat, so hover over the bottom or the top of your screen to find your the chat button. Oh, yes. Oh, and now I see that there were messages about me coming back. Sorry, I was in other rooms. Maybe warn your students, not like what I did next time. So there's a cost to using Zoom. It's $15 a month for one facilitator. You only need one account per school unless you plan to have multiple classes happening at the exact same time. And then you only need a paid account if they're going to be longer than 40 minutes. So if you're just using it for tutoring and it's only half an hour, then you're going to be just fine. But if you're in the chat, next to where it says in blue, like everyone, there's a button that says more. And if you click more, oh, wait a minute. Oops. You know what? Scratch that. I have to open up that permission, which I realized I didn't do with this account. But for next week, I'll have opened up the permission to attach files. And then you could send each other files using that more button. So I have a different account that I use with my students, the other link I had sent you, and I just didn't realize this one wasn't set up. So any other questions about this technology, or specifically Zoom, or any other questions about the whole virtual meeting technology? Okay, cool. And anybody else want to share what their concerns are or what their assumptions are about the online experience? Gary?
I've found a couple of things. I've only been teaching part-time online for about 2 years, and I'm using GoToMeeting, and I can see a number of things in this Zoom that look better in many respects. But one thing that I found is that more than half of my students don't have quiet areas. Their parents don't have them have their own tablets or computers, and in fact, Anytime they use the computer, they're on their parents' sign-on, and their parents want to be watching what they're doing or in the same room. So a lot of times kids are in rooms like kitchens, and I'm trying to convince parents to do something else. And the dog is barking, the other kids are running around, there's all sorts of commotion and activity. And even if they mute stuff, I can tell that they're often not focused. So that's one concern. Somehow we have to convince parents to let them be in their own rooms, especially when I want to hear how good their trope is sounding. It just doesn't work. Another thing is when I teach in the classroom that isn't online, I'm regularly having students get up and move around, come to the board, write the answers, more than one student at a time, or take turns, or do hangman, or this or that. One of my concerns is that when they're tethered to the computer with a headset with a cord, I know that there's headsets that are wireless also, they're just not moving around as much. And I don't know the long-term effect of that. I can't believe it's too good. And the last thing is that I always have kids do a lot of writing. I want them to get interactive. It's not just reading out of a book or reading sentences. I think writing and translating is important also. And I haven't yet mastered how to write on this, but when I want to see their Hebrew script, and so I can walk around a class and I can see what they're doing, and it looks usually very, very good. But I think it's going to take a while to master anything that's going to look good on the screen here. So that was one of my concerns.
Yes,
maybe
and
write it by hand and show it. I don't know.
Well, and actually, what I often have the students do for homework is they'll do a lot of their writing for homework, and the parents scan or take a picture. The kids have learned how to do it too, but scan, take a picture, and they email that to me before class. But you're right, in terms of writing on a computer screen, that's definitely not going to be a measure of their writing success, and it's not going to be a way to tell how they write unless they have like a Wacom tablet, which is not that expensive, but it depends. It's all relative, on your budgets. A Wacom tablet, I think you could buy one for a little under $100 or maybe just a little over $100, but for some people that's a lot of money. And if you were at my New Cage, one of my New Cage conference talks, like I personally bought 3 tablets to send to my kids if they need them, because they can be expensive. But just so you're aware, on Cyber Monday on Groupon, I was able to find them for like $50 each. So it wasn't even that bad. And if a student needs it, I charge them a couple dollars a month just so that they remember that this isn't free, and that I do hope to get it back in working condition. So just enough like that they'll pay attention to it, but not enough that it'll break any budgets, and that might be something that your school is willing to do, is to buy 1 or 2 just to make sure that kids have them. As for the sitting in one place, we actually don't sit in one place all the time in my class, but none of my kids have to use headsets. They all have computers that have mics and speakers. And if they did have to use a headset, then that would change things, in terms of our planning. So that's one of those things you could decide. Do you require them to have a mic and speaker that's not a headset so that you could be active and do things? Or are you okay with headset? So with the last 10 minutes, I want to go over just a couple key ideas that are going to be important for us to keep in mind over the course, just in terms of our teaching. And let me bring up what the homework was going to be. So I'm going to show you, some of you have seen this already, so I'm going to just breeze through it, and I'm going to give you a PowerPoint resource for those of you who have not seen it. It's what I call the pillars of success for teaching online. So we're going to take a quick look at that. And we're also going to get a little bit of introduction into backwards design, which is a framework for instructional design. Now, if you have teaching background and you've learned about instructional design and those frameworks for teaching, this is the one that I like the most, but any organized way of creating your lessons and your curriculum and scaffolding, from one lesson to another. Any organized way of doing that is just fine. I just really like the backwards design one, and when you start thinking in those terms, your teaching experience online becomes really strategic, I would say. Then you could easily come up with plan B, plan C, just in case something happens with technology or other, So I'm going to pull up this slide for you and share my screen. Mm-hmm. So these are the 5 basic things that you really need to have going on at your school for your online class or teaching, tutoring to be successful. And like I said, because I know several of you have seen this before, I'm not really going to go into it too much, but I will share a PowerPoint with you that has all this information. So one is obviously the technology. You have to figure out what your requirements are going to be in terms of technology and spell it out for your families, and they need to buy into that. And you have to be pretty strict about what your rules are. And you could decide that you're not going to have rules and it's bring your own device and everything's okay, and that's fine. But just understanding that there are going to be potential difficulties for you as the facilitator and then for the students if you're not going to have those specifications. So for example, just in the beginning when some people were having different ways of accessing the annotation and then the being able to get back to the other menu bar, those kinds of things, I feel pretty comfortable with troubleshooting myself if I have to. And I have my phone next to me and I put that into the emails to the parents that they can call if there's a problem. I have my phone on the first 5 minutes before and really even before that, and like through, at least 5 minutes of the start class time, so they could call and I could walk them through things if I have to. But if I'm doing that, then I'm not teaching at that moment. So you have to have a plan for what your students could do without you being actively involved. So for example, like the writing activity we did at the beginning, that might be a good thing to get them to be productive while you're troubleshooting with somebody. But the more you can be on top of your technology resources, what you're comfortable with working with, the better. Because if you get to know your technologies well enough, then you could troubleshoot issues with the students. It may be that you require your parents to just know about their technologies and try to figure them out. That might be a responsibility there. The design, so I was just saying that, talking about backwards design a little bit, that having a strategic, well-planned out class is going to be important. And it's going to change. And so, of course, having that flexibility of a teacher to just roll with the punches is going to be really important. But if you could imagine having an idea, I want to use this particular website, and then taking the time to open up the web browser, log in, maybe you have your email open and you have to bring up a new tab and do all of that. For us as adults, it's not a big deal, but for kids, that's like 10 seconds of their life that just wasted away, and they're going to start finding other ways to use that 10 seconds, and then bringing them back is going to be pretty difficult. Outcome alignment. So, and I just noticed that there's a chat. So you're aware when we're in a screen like this, I don't see the chats, but I do see that a little alert comes up that tells me I should look at the chat. And, oh, great. So just people helping each other. Wonderful. So understanding what the expectations are for your class, which I'm sure you do anyway as teachers, and making sure that the activities you're choosing are really aligning to those outcomes. There's so many cool technologies that you're going to experience and you're going to love them, or maybe not, but your kids would love them. But really knowing that what we're spending our time on is moving us towards those goals. That's going to be important, especially if you're coming from a place where the administrators or the community are a little skeptical about what's happening. We want to make sure, and that's why I'm hosting this class, is because you know, this is going to be really important, and I don't want it to fail because people don't know what they don't know. You know, I want you to be well trained and to have this background so that you could go in and you could be successful out of the gate, and then people will buy into it, and now they'll be more comfortable with this idea, which is still, you know, we all like it, but not everybody feels the same way. You need that support and buy-in from the parents, from other teachers, and from the clergy. One concern that I've heard people say, maybe not anyone here, but you know, the kids are, why would they come to school if they could just go to school online? And one of the reasons is part of the community. You know, being a part of a community is really important. So then other people will think like, well, then if they're online, they're not getting a sense of community. And why would they continue with our synagogue? And actually, there are going to be ways, and we'll go through some of those ways, to create that sense of community, not just with each other as students, but also with your school as a whole and with your community as a whole.
That's been a kind of a catch-22 concern of mine too, because on one hand, we could really help provide education for more students and to be more flexible and accommodating to their schedules for sports and things like that if we offered the online option. But on the other hand, our class sizes are really, really, really small to begin with. Mm-hmm. Our 7th grade has doubled. We've gone from 2 to 4 students in person, and I have a lot of combined classes in our school, that there's a real fear of like, we can't afford to take anyone else out of the physical classroom because classes are already so small.
Yes, that is a serious concern. And that's something that, you know, I'm going to ask you, all of you, to think a little bit about these issues for us to discuss next week. And the learning management system. So I don't actually recommend using a learning management system with kids in our age range, because it's a lot to manage. And if they're not regularly checking email, many of them don't even have their email accounts, because you have to be 13 or older in most cases to even have an email. So, you know, if kids don't even have email and they're not used to checking it, then they're not used to getting these alerts, which come to you from an LMS via email. And it becomes a big management issue for their parents to remember to log into one more thing and check the homework and check this to make sure their kids are doing what they're doing. So with these younger kids, I actually just use email to communicate to their parents. And if the kid has emails, I'll copy them on it as well. But because we're adults and we can handle it, I do have a learning management system, an account set up with the BJE's learning management system, which actually I could show that to you. And that is right over, not here. My little bar is in my way. There we go. So this is what it looks like. And it didn't have a discussion board already built in. So I asked them to add that in. So I'm not ready for you to go into this quite yet, but just to give you a sense of what this is going to look like, I'll email you a link. And this is just a description of the course. But you're going to see what a message about what your homework is. And we are not going to have any quizzes per se, unless you have to miss something, whereas then that might be the additional homework assignment. So if you have to miss a class, there will be homework that'll just verify that not only did you watch the archive, but you did the activities that we had done in the class. So you'll just have each week something will pop up and it'll tell you the instructions for what you're supposed to do that particular week. And there will also be an important part of this is going to be both a discussion board and a journal. And so in the journal, that one's pretty free, however you like to use it, but you're going to be taking notes on your thoughts, your ideas, and that's only going to be shared between you and me. And so you could say whatever you want, and that'll be private. The discussion board is what you're going to be sharing with the rest of your class. So, boy, this went a lot faster than I thought it would. So I don't want to keep you over by more than just a couple minutes out of respect for your time. So we'll save some of the things we were going to talk about this week for next week. But I will show you, or I will tell you, that one of the big things that I hope to do at the start of next week is to take a look at your course outcomes and your schedule. And since you are teachers, you probably already have a sense of week 1, this is what we do. Week 2, this is what we do. So this shouldn't be a big assignment. But we are going to take a look at that next week in the context of backwards design. And backwards design basically asks you to start with the goal. You know, what is it that you're trying to achieve? What are the outcomes that the students need to achieve in this class as a whole? And then in this one class session, what do you hope they get out of it? And then based off of that, you're designing your lessons and your assessments. And for me, at least, because it is Hebrew school and it's not day school, assessments are usually games and activities where I could see the results of their learning. I don't personally give multiple choice quizzes or anything like that. If you have to do that, though, there are tools I could show you. Are there any questions about that? And then I'll just let you know what you'll be doing for next week and what to expect.
So should we expect in this course to receive an email after each class, like highlighting what we need to be prepared for with the next one, or one more so before the next class?
Great, thank you for asking that. So I have, like I said, I have your syllabus here, and I'll share it with you just because that's what I'm looking at right now, so we might as well look at the same thing. I do have this syllabus that will tell you your agenda, so you won't have to have an email each week with that kind of information, and it'll cover, you know, both what our agenda is for that meeting and then what your homework will be afterwards if you're doing the homework. If you're not doing the homework, I would at least look at those assignments so that you're aware of the kinds of things I'm asking people to consider and to think about. And in that regard, you might decide to do some of the assignments because they're either fun or they help you learn a little bit more about a certain topic. If you're going for a certificate, all the assignments are required, and you do need to earn a satisfactory grade on those assignments, and I will have a rubric for you. I'm still figuring out this learning management system because it's different than the ones that I've used in the past. But just being able to put all this in there so that you can see how you're being graded. And if you aren't successful in your first attempt with an assignment, I let you redo it as many times as you need to become successful. So you don't have to worry about failing one assignment and then you fail the entire class. I'm here to help you succeed. That's the goal. But at the same time, and I didn't mention this earlier, the past 5 years I was teaching at the college level. I was certifying the college instructors on how to teach online. So my standards are very high, which for you is a great thing because that means you're going to get the same quality that college instructors would get in terms of your training. And it does mean that I demand really great quality, but at least you know that if you've done something satisfactorily, that you've done really well and you should be very confident in yourself. But also, don't be scared because none of this is meant to be scary. It's all just really meant to be experiences that'll support you to be a better teacher in an online environment. So you could just see, like, from some of these first assignments, to interview a parent, a student, or somebody to find out the kinds of things the games that they like. Because if we understand what the kids like, what engages them in their free time, then we'll understand ways that we could better engage them in the classroom. So, or searching for an app on the App Store, those are the kinds of things that you'll be doing. The only time I've ever had people really not pass the first time around would be, for example, like a lesson, like designing a lesson because they just didn't read all the instructions and include all the parts, or for a discussion board, not like if you say, I agree with her, that's not, going to pass. But if you really share, critically think and share those reflections, then I'm sure it'll be just fine. So Any other questions before we go? I'm sure once you have a chance to look at the syllabus, that'll answer a lot of the nuts and bolts type of questions. Okay, well, on that note, just to give you an idea of what you're going to
Just
expect.
a quick question, Stephanie.
Go ahead.
I noticed that all your dates are earlier in August.
Oh, yes. So, yeah, I realized I brought up a different version. Originally, I wanted to hold this class to start in August so that you'd have several weeks of background before your first day of school. But then I was told a couple weeks before we got started, or before we advertised, that for most of you that wasn't going to be realistic because you were still on vacation or this and that. So I compromised and we're starting later. This particular syllabus that I pulled up doesn't reflect that, but the assignments are basically the same. So thank you for bringing that up. So just to give you a sense of what to expect, we're going to be looking at some video clips so you could see what class looks like in my class, just to give you a little bit of context. We're going to be looking at backwards design and really going through, looking at our outline of our existing courses. We're looking at them critically so that we can see, is what we have right now going to work online, or do we have to make some modifications? And there will be modifications in terms of how you teach it and the activities they do, but there may also have to be modifications in terms of a sequence, not necessarily, but I want to make sure to support you in that process. And all along the way, we'll be doing different types of activities, researching apps and technologies that could be helpful online. I have very specific ones, including Nearpod, which is something I'm going to ask you to install onto your device for next week so you could experience that. And for those of you who are going to be teaching this year, this is going to be really important. And if you're going to do the certification, it's going to be important. But I'm going to ask you to meet with a partner at one point and record yourself teaching each other. So you could do that, you'll figure out with your partner what time that would work. But we're going to be learning the logistics, and that's part of the point there, is so you could actually be on the facilitator side, pressing all the buttons that manage the class. We're going to come up with specific lessons, planning out the first couple of days of school. So if you're not teaching right now, it could still be useful, because you could be planning your in-person class first days of school, what you do. But then now you're just thinking of it also in terms of how that would work logistically online. And some of these technologies you might find you want to use for your in-person classes homework, if you have that kind of buy-in where parents will actually make their kids do homework. September 8th, I'm sorry, not September 8th, because now we're 6 weeks later. After the first 6 weeks, if you're auditing, you're not required to attend the rest of the sessions, other than I really hope you'll come on May 11th to the ePortfolio presentations for the certification people. So the first 6 weeks really gives you the nuts and bolts of what you need to get started. After that, you're still going to be learning a lot, but it's really going more in depth. We're going to be looking at things people are actually doing in their classes with their teaching. If we don't have people teaching in a class setting, you'll at least have my lessons to look at and to review and to think, what could we do differently? What could we do better? And really digging past the theory and getting into real teaching and real problem solving for, the day-to-day classes. And we will be looking a little more deeply into technologies, but that's the second half is really more about, getting really deep into the specifics of teaching online. And those people who are doing the certification, like I said, they'll be working on their ePortfolio. The ePortfolio is basically a collection of their homework assignments. And then there will be a couple lessons that I'm going to ask you to at least outline how you're going to do them, but one lesson where you're going to go a bit deeper and you're going to have that written out. And this is one of the cool things with the teachers I've taught. at the college level is when the e-portfolio is done, and I'm going to give you a template so you don't have to worry about figuring all that stuff out. It'll just be copy and paste, pretty easy. But it's a beautiful thing, you know, and it's up online on SlideShare, and then you could show it off and get hired in places all over the country to teach after they see what great work you do. And so that on the 11th is when you're going to be presenting those e-portfolios to one another, which is really going to, for the most part, be sharing the lessons that you've done that are unique to your class. So are there any questions about that? Okay, well, thank you so much for being here. I'm sorry that I kept you late. I usually don't do that. I won't do it again. Next week, just to make sure again that we all know how to get online and we don't have any issues, I'd still like to meet, you know, get people to start logging in 10 minutes before the hour. But after that, we could start logging in just a couple minutes before class, and that should be just fine. So, toda raba. If you are comfortable, you're welcome to go. If you have any questions still, you know, I'm happy to stay on and answer them.
I was just curious what the daytime jobs are of most people. Like, I'm a volunteer at our Hebrew school, and I don't get paid for it. It's just a part-time job that only takes around 20 hours a week. But what are people's? I'm a software engineer during the day. That's the other 60 hours a week. What are people doing as their main jobs?
Well, I know Amy said that she's the director at her synagogue, and Justin makes those magnetic shoal. You know, he's that inventor, though I think he also teaches at a shoal or two. And Alicia, you're full.
Yes, I'm also the director of a school, so I'm full-time in the school.
This is Debbie. I'm an education assistant, so I'm full-time in the Hebrew school.
Toda rabba. And I think what we'll do for next week is that could be one of our getting to know you questions. So thank you. Did anyone else have questions or anything before we go? Okay. Well, to log out, if you hover your mouse over the bottom of the screen, there's a button that should say leave meeting. As the facilitator, I could just end it for everybody and then you all get kicked out. But I'll let you practice leaving on your own, just in case you haven't done that yet.
All right. Thank you, Stephanie. Bye-bye.
You're
Good night.
welcome. Good night.
Thank you, Stephanie.
You're welcome. Toda rabba.
Thank you. Stephanie, I have a quick question. I could not write on the board, so I don't know what I have a Mac.
Okay. And is it a Mac, a laptop? A MacBook?
Yeah, a MacBook. Is that the problem?
I think there are just different things that you probably have to do. So before you go, let's just see if we could make it work.
Okay.
So were you able to hover over the bar and see?
Yes, that I see.
Annotate?
Yeah.
And you clicked on more, and did you click the word annotate?
Where? I'm sorry, where?
So there should either be an icon that says annotate, or there should be, oh, I'm sorry, let me share a screen so that we could do
that. Because I didn't see anything that said annotate. And
so do you see the bar where it says mute, stop video, share, maybe white, actually your features are different. Do you see a bar when you hover at the top or bottom of your screen that tells you where you can mute?
I see recording. I see you are viewing Stephanie Burek's screen, options. And then at the bottom, I see the mute, the stop. Yes.
Okay. So at the bottom, do you see one of them says more?
No. I don't see anything that says more. It's
okay. Well,
mute, stop video, invite participants, share screen, chat, and record. And then leave meeting. That's all I see.
Okay. You know, so this is the one thing that's kind of tricky with all of these tools, but Zoom included, is that even if you shared your screen with me, I'm not sure that I could see your options.
Okay.
So what I would have to do is I would have to I would have to look up, you know, your particular kind of computer and then see what the options are. But what I'm doing right now is I'm just taking a quick picture of my screen so I could show you what mine looks like.
Okay.
I'm going to share with you in a second. So do you see this? My mouth is like open, like, oh. Do you see this picture where it shows you the mute button?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So as the facilitator, it looks a little different, but you can see that's what that looks like. And there's supposed to be something.
Yeah, see, I don't have that more, and I don't have even the whiteboard, but I could see the whiteboard, but I do not have that more.
Oh,
Just,
you know what? Becky was saying, no, Farah was saying that she clicked on her picture and then it gave her the option to.
okay, I can try that.
Yeah.
Okay, and okay, so hopefully it will work, because it's not that I didn't want to do it, I just couldn't do it.
Oh,
So.
yeah, no problem. Do you want to try right now? It's
yeah, sure. I mean,
so you could, even on this background, I'll ask
okay,
people.
I'm clicking myself. Okay. Let's see.
Did something come up?
No.
Let's see. The other thing is maybe under participants.
If you click on
participants.
It says mute me and raise hand. That's the only two things that appear. Oh, you want me to click on that? No, but.
Is there a button that says more next to your name or no?
Mute and rename.
Okay. And I'm going to write down, so you have a Mac, and then what is it, like you keep it up to date? It's the most up to date software?
Yeah, pretty much, because, pretty much when I get, I will double check, but, you know, the Macs are very easy to.
Yeah.
Your name message and you just do it. So, but I'll check it, and I'll ask my son too.
Yeah, so what I'll do is I'm going to ask the Zoom people if there's a special way for people with Mac to get on. And in the meantime, what I'm going to ask you to do is this link that I gave you to get into this class.
Okay.
You could use it any time of the day.
Okay.
And you'll get in. So I don't even have to be there.
Right, I tried it yesterday, I think. I tried it, yeah.
Good. So when your son's there or something, you could practice. You could go in, and I'll try to find directions and send them to you. But either way, with the directions or not, you could go in and you could try to figure it out with your son, see if that works. And if I can find the directions, you know, just give it a try, and we'll try to figure it out before next week. So.
Excellent. And one more quick question. When you said the notepad, right? You said to bring, do you mean an iPad or?
Yeah, either an iPad or an Android tablet.
Okay.
Do you have either of those?
I have iPads in the school. I have like 10 iPads. So I can bring.
Good.
Okay. But so an iPad is going to be okay. And I don't have a stylo, but is that okay too?
Well, it's fine for us, but you're going to see how it's going to be better if you do for writing.
Okay. So I can purchase a stylo and have it.
Yeah, it should only be a couple bucks, and there are lots of places that give them away for free, like, you know, their name on it. So
wonderful.
Okay. Thank you
so much, Laila Tov.
Laila Tov.
Bye.